Welcome to BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. Today's debate is about entrepreneurship, whether it's nature or nurture that produces entrepreneurs. The BCS recently ran a survey on its homepage on the website asking that very question. About 700 out of 1,200 felt that entrepreneurs could be made, implying obviously that 500 out of 1,200 thought they were born. So to discuss these issues, we have with us today Chris Thomas, Director at Sports Fusion. Welcome, Chris. We have Emma Jones from Startup Britain, founder of Enterprise Nation. Welcome, Emma. And we also have here Timothy Barnes, Director at UCL Advances. Well, welcome, Tim. Now let's start off with a, well, perhaps not contentious, we'll see, question. What constitutes the entrepreneurial mindset? Who'd like to leap in on that one first? Emma looks keen.
Oh, I was going to say, who would like to leap in on that one first? Emma, you will be. Thank you, Brian. Lovely to be here. I think what constitutes the entrepreneurial mindset is essentially anyone who feels passionate about pursuing something that they want to turn into a business. I know we'll talk about this throughout the debate, but I think as long as you are committed to hard work, to seeing an idea go through, being persistent and not giving up, then that gives you the credibility to have an entrepreneurial mindset. And I do think that most people in Britain have it. I see this month in and month out. We run something called Startup Saturday, which is for people who have an idea and want to start a business. And I see people from all backgrounds, whether they having been in employment for 25 years, mums maybe who've just had children, students who have just come out of university, people who have spotted a gap in the market, have got a hobby that they want to turn into a way of making a living. These people have what I believe is an entrepreneurial mindset. They've found an idea, want to turn it into a business, and have the commitment to see that through.
Okay. What about the creative element, Tim?
The creative element is extremely important because you need to be able to, as Emma said, not only spot an opportunity, but be able to have thought about it in a way which has taken you to a potential solution that others may not yet have seen. So whether or not that's something that's just about you because you have a creative spark, or sometimes it's about timing, that the resources that you needed to make that happen, or technology or whatever it was that might have enabled your solution might not previously have been there. Sometimes it's that wonderful thing, a change in government legislation which makes something required, which can also drive it. So you need that. You do need the ability to look at things a little bit differently. There's a lot of idea of risk as being something that's part of the entrepreneurial mindset. I don't think it's a desire or an appetite for risk that needs to be there in terms of driving an entrepreneur, but it does need to be something that people are perhaps comfortable with. They need to be able to understand how it balances against the potential rewards. I think one of the most important elements is not an appetite for risk or a desire for it, but an understanding of the balance between risk and reward, and that, you know, a low risk, low reward business is just as much about being an entrepreneur and being viable and opening a shop that might just be the only thing that you ever want to do, is just as much a valid entrepreneurial contribution as somebody who's trying to start, you know, the next global technology company. So for me, it's are there lots of people out there with the potential for an entrepreneurial mindset? Absolutely. Many more people than might think of themselves as being the next, you know, leader or founder of companies like the Googles and the Apples of the world, but people who are doing things on their high street. Doctors who decide to come out of regular practice and set up a new NHS practice or trust are running small businesses. Architects are running small businesses. People who are in flower shops and newsagents are running small businesses. They all need to come into the definition of entrepreneur, which for me is not about risk. It's about being able to plan for tomorrow without regard for the resources at hand today.
Okay. Now, Chris, we're not to refer to you as a serial entrepreneur, I know, but you're somebody that's been in the space, obviously. What's your view of the entrepreneurial mindset?
Well, I would like to move the emphasis to a degree back on the word risk, because I think that I can't quite see what would distinguish the word entrepreneur from other words to describe somebody who starts a business if it's not the word risk. It doesn't necessarily have to be financial risk, but when we do something new, we take a risk, both financially, but also in terms of our own identity, how we position ourselves in society, what we say to our families, what our friends and colleagues think about us. So being able to do that and to potentially fail, I think, is an inherent part of entrepreneurship. So I think that creativity is obviously vital, but also the ability to genuinely in a balanced way, judge whether you have a competitive advantage is vital, because I feel that sometimes to be an entrepreneur is more important than to genuinely think through whether you have a competitive advantage. And I think Jack Welch said, if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't start a business. And I would say that. I would say thinking about defining, understanding your competitive advantage is vital. And by the way, I'm not an advocate of competitive advantage being a USP. It doesn't have to be unique. You can just be better at doing something that other people do. You can just work harder. So I would like to refocus the emphasis back on the word risk, because I think that's an inherent part of the word entrepreneurship, but I do concede that that's my understanding of it. So I think the willingness to risk something, whether it's money or personal pride or personal identity, or a corporate career, all of those things are risks. And I think without being able to take them, I can't see that you will take the first step in this journey. I think it's vital that you have the ability and you have sufficient advice to be able to identify your competitive advantage. I think that's a major fault in a number of businesses. That the simple desire to be an entrepreneur is not enough. It has to be married to ability to execute, or at least ability to develop the skills to execute or bring them in. But also you have to be very clear about why what you're doing is going to make a difference. And I absolutely oppose those people who say, what's your business is USP, how's your product different? Because I don't think your product needs to be different. I just think it needs to be better, or it needs to be delivered in a more exciting way. And I think the last thing, which is very, very pertinent to my definition of an entrepreneur, being the person or persons who start a business and take it to a certain level of maturity, is the ability to recognize that you need very different skills at very different stages of the process. And there is a moment, it is like bringing up a child. There's a huge difference between a 3-year-old, a 10-year-old, a teenager, and a young adult. And I regard my own business as being a teenager. I'm very proud of it. I'm very excited by where we are, but I realise that it now needs to grow up. It needs to do some other things, and those things are quite challenging. And either I can do them, or I know who can, or I will fail. Right. And so constantly you're faced with that need to keep adapting, keep throwing away what you did yesterday that worked, because you are a different organisation today.
I think there's one thing that's interesting about that, which is it feeds back to this idea of what's the entrepreneurial mindset. There is a starting impression in the minds of many people who haven't been through an entrepreneurial experience or journey of their own, or know somebody who does, who thinks that the risky point is the point at which you start, and that there's some wonderful line on a chart somewhere that goes, oh look, I took some risk, and it could all fall off a cliff, or it could all grow, and then riches. And what they don't understand is you start and you grow a bit, and it plateaus, and then you have to risk it all again and do it again, and then you have to risk it all again. And if at any of these points it fails, you can go all the way back, right the way down the snake, all the way back to the starting point, and lose everything. And it's actually a much more haphazard, much more chaotic, much more the risks keep coming time and time again, the challenges keep coming time and time again, and it isn't just one straight flow. It's an important thing for many entrepreneurs to really have their heads around.
Interesting. Now, Emma, when we were talking about the stats from the BCS, albeit it was just radio buttons on a website, I appreciate that it's not hard research, but you were surprised that there was only 60% that thought that it could be nurtured, this entrepreneurialism. I
was surprised that so many people said that entrepreneurs are born, but just before I comment on that, I've got these words. I think it's so important when we talk about people starting a business and entrepreneurship in general. The terminology that we use, I think, has put off quite a few people from starting a business. So to point to Chris's point on risk, I think the greatest risk for anyone now is not to take steps to start a business, because it is now becoming more risky to stay in employment than it is to actually start a business. And in terms of how people are being really clever about how they minimise their risk when starting out. So one of our books that we brought out a couple of years ago was called Working 5 to 9, How to Start a Business in Your Spare Time. Because we have seen over 5 million people who carry on with the day job and build a business at nights and weekends. So they're keeping the security of the salary coming in, building the business, building their confidence, building the cash flow in the business in their spare time. And the great thing, and I say this in the hallowed halls of BCS, the most incredible thing that we have at our disposal at the moment is technology.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that model sounds like work for somebody that's developing their own app, wouldn't it? Or
But if you take any discipline of any business that's starting at the moment, from fashion to food to finance, people are embracing free or low-cost technology to get their product out there and to make sales. So you can do it in your spare time, you can do it on a budget. As I quite often say, you can start a business now for less than 100 quid. Where is the risk in that? The only risk is not taking steps to do it. But I was surprised, just back to these figures, in terms of the number of people who believe that entrepreneurs are born. What I strongly feel, and I have been in the world of self-employment now for 12 years, either starting my own businesses or advising thousands of other people to get started in business as well. What I have recognised is that if you are born into a family of business owners and entrepreneurs, so a mum or a dad running a business from home, you are more likely to start a business. But that's not because you've inherited any kind of gene from your parents, it's because as you grew up, you were surrounded by someone who's running a business. So when it comes to making your own career choice, it's a very natural choice to make. But what I do firmly believe is that people who have got a good idea, who are not from a family stock of entrepreneurs, absolutely can be taught about how you take that idea, turn it into a business plan, turn it into a fully functioning business. And just back to the point, and then I will stop talking about risk, but risk in a business in terms of when you grow that business, you can still keep a business at low risk, because what we are seeing growing businesses do is focus on what they do best and outsource the rest. So I am seeing businesses still home-based, still run from the spare room, going global because they're selling on Facebook, they're using Twitter, they're using Alibaba.com to sell their goods. They are outsourcing fulfillment, they're outsourcing manufacturing and production. They're not increasing their headcount, they're not increasing their costs, but they are increasing their profitability. So they're keeping their risks low, but they're still growing great global businesses.
Okay, and Tim, you had a slightly different view, I think, on the breadth of those skills, who can employ them and who can't.
I mean, I actually think there's a number of things there, not least of which is the general point, the idea that there are lots of people out there who could be thinking about starting a business, keeping it at home, keeping it, turning over, getting something started, testing it. There's things like the lean model for going out and testing and evaluating things. Lean not really meaning don't spend money in this case, but keeping it lean means really keeping it tight, generating lots of data, getting lots of analytics that you can use to make decisions, test things out with your customers, accelerate those things as quickly as possible. Those are all good points. I think I was going to say there's a bad moment at the moment to talk about outsourcing, because we're living in a moment in which G4S and security has brought something of a question mark to the way that outsourcing works at the moment. But that's probably unfair, and it's probably worth reinforcing that despite things like that being current, there are of course clearly great things to do like that. I started some of my entrepreneurial, well actually I started my first business at the age of 12, but I was working in the dot-com years for an investment company in East London, and it was great because then we were putting the first £250,000 into a business to build a website, to bring in servers. And it is absolutely true that you can now do that for under 100 quid. In fact, you can joke about credit card businesses and so on, but the combination of WordPress, Eventbrite, various online banking things does mean you can get a heck of a long way with very, very little investment to test an idea. But to me, the point of being able to do that is the ability to test. It comes back to risk. And the thing that I want to come back to, and I don't want to get into the semantics of what the words mean, but is this idea that risk is negative. Risk is inherent in the idea that there's something out there that has not yet been done and has not yet been proven. And risk needs to be translated to opportunity. And the difference is that an entrepreneur will see that as a good thing. The best thing for an entrepreneur is not because that they relish in other people's pain, but the best thing for an entrepreneur is somebody with a problem, because people pay to have problems taken away. And to be able to understand that when somebody's having a whinge at you in the pub or complaining about what's going on, or perhaps unfairly, in Chris's case, having one of those kind of pub-type conversations where somebody's complaining about the ref again and how unfair he is, and it's all, and actually to go, do you know what, there's a business in that. That's entrepreneurial. And that's about recognizing where there's an opportunity and there's the ability to provide a solution that isn't there, and it might work and it might not. But that isn't about risk being evil or anything else. That is a good thing. And that's something that lots of people can do. And what's important is not that there are some people who do that and some people who don't. Being born isn't about, do you have a gene? It's about, by the time you've made it to adulthood, do you have the self-confidence to believe you can do that? Do you have the belief and those priorities in life that you want to go and build that, not that you want to go and do something else with your life? Just work 9 to 5 because actually what you want to do is, jump off a cliff or whatever it is that people want to do, or pay for diving holidays. But you want to be able to build something, fulfill an opportunity, and in that case, we can educate, we can train, we can test, we can mentor, we can show people the pitfalls and mistakes that others have made so they're less likely to make themselves, and we can help them get to where they want to be faster and bigger and in better condition.